win it. Anybody can win it, and they're going to get even more money this time round, so why wouldn't you go in the draw?
For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Join me, Neil Oliver, every Sunday night at 6 p.m. on GB News. And if an hour is not nearly enough for you, go to gbnews.com for special extended episodes online every Friday at 9 p.m, where we can truly get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on. GB News, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
GB News brings you accurate reporting of the day's topical agenda.
When the news breaks, wherever and whenever it's happening,
We'll be there.
This is GB News.
the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
Hi there, it's 6 o'clock and I'm Michelle Dewberry and this is Dewbs Co. Coming up tonight, Keir Starmer has spoken out about his plans to stop the boats. He's going to almost instantly cancel the Rwanda plan, expand some of the terrorism acts and involve MI5. So is he the man to stop these crossings once and for all? Speaking of Labour, Wes Streeting reckons loads of Tories are apparently considering defecting to that party. Your thoughts on that? And we've all seen these protests at universities now about the situation in Gaza and those lists of demands. Let me ask you a simple question. How much power do you think that students should have over what their universities do? Professor Matt Goodwin joins me tonight. He is a university professor, so I'm fascinated into his insight. But what's yours? Also, new guidance has been issued to MPs this week about how to spot and combat conspiracy theories. Everything from Agenda 2030, the Great Reset, 15-minute cities, chemtrails, it all gets a mention. What do you make to it all? And the army, how do we get people into it? There's a plan in place for the young, week-long summer camps. And for the veterans, you go back for shifts. Is this the future of the army? Would you sign up to it? I've got all of that and more coming up in the next hour. But first, let's get tonight's latest news headlines.
Michelle, thank you very much and good evening from the newsroom. It's just after 6 o'clock. Leading the news tonight, a man who led an armed robbery during which a police officer was shot dead has been sentenced today to a minimum of 40 years behind bars. 38-year-old PC Sharon Beshenevsky was fatally shot when she interrupted the raid in Bradford nearly 20 years ago. 75-year-old Pirandita Khan, who spent 15 years on the run, was found guilty of murder despite not pulling the trigger. He's the last of 7 men involved in the robbery to be convicted. Retired Detective Chief Superintendent Andy Brennan described Dita Khan as a violent man.
The reason why he's here at 75 years of age is on the basis that he decided to flee the country in order to try and make good his escape and avoid being held responsible and accountable for his part in what had taken place. And let's be absolutely clear, he is clearly the one person that was responsible for organising and planning this and making sure that those that went in there had firearms and loaded firearms in that case.
A former prisoner has been detained in hospital indefinitely for what a judge at the Old Bailey described as the senseless killing of an elderly mobility scooter rider. The court heard that Lee Byer was psychotic when he stabbed Thomas O'Halloran in August 2022. The 87-year-old grandfather suffered multiple wounds to his neck, his chest and abdomen. Just 5 days before that attack in West London, Byer had been released from prison on bail after serving a 12-year sentence for robbery. Labour says that it's committed to scrapping the Rwanda migration scheme if it wins the general election. Sir Keir Starmer says if he becomes Prime Minister, he'll replace the scheme with a special border force to tackle people smugglers. Dover MP Natalie Elfique, who's just switched from the Conservatives to Labour, has welcomed the approach, claiming that Rishi Sunak, she says, has failed to keep the borders secure. However, the Prime Minister insists the Rwanda plan is still the deterrent the UK needs.
The question for Keir Starmer then is, if he cares so much about that, why did he vote against the new laws that we passed to give our law enforcement officers new powers? They've now used those to arrest almost 1,000 people connected with illegal migration, sentence them to hundreds of years in prison, and if it was up to him, all those people will be out on our streets. So I just think it's the rank hypocrisy of this position.
Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's also been defending the government's policies on net zero today. Speaking at an event in Oxford, Rishi Sunak said the government is aiming to reach targets in a more pragmatic way. He acknowledged, though, that he has received a lot of flack for those policies, but maintains it's still the right move for the country. We've heard today that the UK is officially out of recession, with the latest figures showing the economy's grown by more than expected. The Office for National Statistics estimates GDP rose by 0.6% in the first 3 months of the year. Predictions were suggesting 0.4%. Rishi Sunak says people will now start to feel better off, but Shadow Chancellor Rachel Reeves says the Conservatives are out of touch.
If you look at this Prime Minister's record, since Rishi Sunak became Prime Minister, the economy is still £300 worse off per person in the country. So these numbers today are not deserving of the victory lap that Rishi Sunak and Jeremy Hunt seem to want to go on.
Israel's Eurovision entry, Eden Galan, insists the song contest is safe for everyone as she faced questions after securing her place in tomorrow's final. Thousands of pro-Palestinian protesters marched outside the venue in Sweden last night. They want Israel to be banned from the contest because of the war in Gaza. However, before her performance, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu criticised what he called an ugly wave of anti-Semitism. And finally, before we head back to Michelle, the Northern Lights are expected to be visible across the UK tonight thanks to a huge solar storm. Forecasters suggest they're likely to be seen across parts of Northern Ireland, Scotland, Northern England and Wales. Experts are saying it could be the most powerful geomagnetic storm in almost 2 decades. That's the latest from the newsroom. Another update at 7 o'clock. Until then, you can sign up to GB News Alerts by scanning the code on your screen or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you very much for that. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm with you till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, I've got the Professor of Politics at the University of Kent, Mark Goodwin, and also the political commentator, Jonathan Liss. Good evening to both of you.
Good evening.
I loved that last item on the headlines there. Did you see it? There's Northern Lights. Let me see if I can get them back onto the screen for you. How beautiful. Look at that. Have you ever seen such a sight? Have you seen them?
I did try to see them when I was in Iceland, but I didn't manage to see them.
They're very hard. They are very pesky. Have you ever seen them, Jonathan?
No, I've seen the midnight sun.
Oh.
I've been to the Arctic Circle in May, and the sun never set, so that was gorgeous, but never seen the Northern Lights.
Well, if you manage to catch a glimpse, do me a favour, take a snapshot and send it, because I'd be absolutely fascinated to see what, indeed, if anything, you actually managed to see. Do you like stuff like that? Is it your thing or not? You're very welcome tonight. I've got lots that I want to talk to you about. You can get in touch with me and join the conversation all the usual ways. You can email gbviews@gbnews.com. You can go on my Twitter or X, reach me there at Michelle Dewbs or at GBNews, or, of course, you can go on the website gbnews.com/yoursay and join the conversation there. But I do think it'd be perhaps remiss of me not to start with a little bit of good news, everyone, but a feel-good Friday activity. What am I talking about? Well, the fact, of course, that figures have revealed that the UK has moved out of recession. I think this is really important just to touch on. Don't worry, I'm not going to do a whole deep and meaningful economic chat this time on a Friday night, worry not, but we always obsess, don't we, when things go the other way. And don't forget, of course, one of Rishi Sunak's 5 pledges. It was all about kind of halving inflation, get the economy growing, and so on and so forth. And people are very quick to hit him when it starts going in the wrong direction. So do you think, Matt Goodwin, this is kind of a... I mean, people won't really be feeling it in their pockets right now, but do you think this is a sign of success and achievement for the Tories?
It's good news, but as you say, do people out there feel it? That's the Ronald Reagan question. Are you better off than you were 4 years ago? And that's subjective, right? Do people really feel themselves getting better off? But it's good news on paper. It's good news that we're out of recession.
There you go. Do you share that optimism and happiness and upbeatness?
I think that there's a bigger point to be made, actually, about the way that we interpret percentage points in GDP, because
0.6 is the number on offer.
Most people won't feel that in their daily lives. It doesn't really matter to you whether the economy is 0.5% up or 0.5% down. What most people have felt over the last couple of years that things have gone in the wrong direction and that they haven't felt a recovery in their daily lives. That may change. We all hope that it changes. But I don't think that this is any kind of cause for celebration. Wages, GDP is way down on pre-pandemic levels, and wages are still obviously stagnating. So I don't think that this is obviously it's good news. Not it'd be worse if it had retracted further, but it's certainly not good news.
Yeah, but you see, you can be the final judge of it at home. Do you think it is good news or not? Because I've got to say, I just feel a little bit like if this was the opposite direction, so if we had gone deeper into recession, you'd never hear the end of it. The Tory bashing would be off the scale. The doom and gloom would be kind of bursting out of every single seam. So should we be a little bit more optimistic? Because I do think sometimes we're not as kind of positive perhaps as we should be when things do start just even the smallest glimmer of going in the right direction. Tell me your thoughts on that. But today, did you see this? We've been talking for such a long time. People often say, well, what's Labour's plan for this and what's Labour's plan for that? And this whole conversation about stopping those birds, which probably is not going to be happening anytime soon anyway. So Keir Starmer, he has now unveiled plans as to what he would be doing. He's going to smash the people smuggling gangs. He's going to almost immediately drop that Rwanda plan. He wants to take 75 million quid of the money that he'd save and create a border security command unit. He wants to involve people like MI5 and so on and so forth. Is Keir Starmer then the man, Matt Goodwin, to stop these crossings in the Channel once and for all?
Well, no, of course he's not. I mean, the Labour plan is not going to work. What they're going to do is remove the only two things that might actually serve as a deterrent. They're going to repeal the Illegal Migration Act, which essentially says that if you enter Britain illegally, you cannot claim asylum. And they're going to overturn the Rwanda plan, that the illegal migrants will be removed to Rwanda. Meanwhile, they're saying they're going to smash the gangs through increased security, which makes me wonder what Keir Starmer thinks the government is doing at the moment or trying to do. Look, Michelle, I've not met anybody who works on this issue in the National Crime Agency or elsewhere who thinks that this plan is going to work. What they describe this plan as is whack-a-mole. You remove one gang and another one pops up, because all you need is a dinghy and a torch, basically, to run a kind of a people smuggling gang. The only way we will get on top of this crisis, and it is a crisis, it's an escalating crisis, the numbers are up 27% this year relative to last year, is by having an effective deterrent. We need a third country deterrent, like Rwanda, maybe other countries as well. That's where Germany's going. It's where Denmark's going. The French are having a debate now about this. We need to get serious about the scale of this crisis. I don't think Labour are serious about this crisis.
Are they not serious, Jonathan?
I think they are serious, but I think it's really good news that Starmer said, definitively that he's going to scrap the Rwanda bill, which is pure political posturing, performance of cruelty. It's not going to work anyway. But where I agree is that this isn't going to work on itself, by itself. Obviously, we have to tackle the people smugglers. Everyone agrees on that, no matter where you are on this issue. But it's not addressing the underlying issues behind this problem. Now, we don't need an effective deterrent. We need an effective alternative. People are always going to be seeking asylum in Britain. There will always be a market for this. As you say, and I agree with you, it's a game of whack-a-mole. If you sort of target them in one place, they'll go other place. And actually, that is going to put people's lives at risk. As experts on this have pointed out, people will seek even less safe places to go on the boats. They might go through worse conditions on the way here. We might see an increase in people drowning in the Channel. So the answer is, if you really want to cut this industry, this gang business that's sprung up, you allow people safe and legal routes to claim asylum here, which is an internationally recognised human right. There are many ways you can do that. Look, you can have processing centres in France. So you can allow people to claim asylum in France. You can allow people to board vessels to come to the UK in order to claim asylum and then have the claims processed very quickly while they're here. You can allow more schemes from different countries, different hotspots in the world where we see influx of migrants, for example, Sudan, which very few people are talking about, but you see huge numbers of internally displaced people from that country. There are so many things you can do. You can even allow certain people to claim asylum in British embassies abroad.
Sure.
They're not interested in any of this
stuff. Can I ask you a question then, right? So first of all, how do you know Rwanda isn't going to work?
Well, he called it performative cruelty.
Now, how do you know it's not going to work?
Well, even by the government's own measures, Matt, Rwanda can only take a few hundred people a year, and we've seen 9,000 people arriving so far this year as it is.
Why are people moving to Ireland?
Well, actually, if you look at the figures on Ireland, there's no definitive proof yet that it is a deterrent.
Right.
It might well be. None of it, you don't know.
But what I'm saying is Labour is saying Rwanda isn't going to work, but I'm saying, how do you know Rwanda's not going to work?
Well, it's certainly incredibly expensive. But what is the measure, what is the metric for it actually working? Is it for no small boats to be coming across the channel anymore?
Fewer people to be risking their lives, like the young girl, the 9-year-old girl who lost her life in the Channel, and I'd say that's on the hands of everybody who doesn't really want an effective deterrent. The second question I have for you is, you say safe and legal routes. What's your upper limit? What's the number? How many should we accept?
Well, obviously, you will have a processing centre, a processing system where people are not evaluated based on numbers, they're evaluated based on their needs. So I don't have an upper number for you. I think it's the history of politicians.
It's easy to say safe and legal routes without actually giving anybody a number.
Matt, you know as well as I do the history of politicians setting limits. They just make a rod for their own backs. David Cameron said tens of thousands a year, and it haunts him for his whole premiership, and it's obviously haunted all of his successors.
But I think the British people
sensible politics.
Know
first
what
of all,
the Labour plan will deliver.
First of all, I'm not a politician, unlike you, obviously, and I'm not a spokesperson for the Labour Party. So, what the Labour Party does, it's the Labour Party. I can disagree with it, but I don't believe that's good politics to set upper numbers. But I do think that is not the right way to approach it. You should be approaching it where people are entitled to claim asylum as they are around the world, and other European countries take far more refugees than we do, by the way.
So if people enter Britain illegally, should they have the right to asylum?
They should have the right to claim asylum because they are not being given alternatives to come here legally. That's the entire point. If you are coming from Sudan, for example, where everyone can agree there's a huge humanitarian crisis right now, there is no legal way for you to come to the UK. None whatsoever. That is wrong. There should be a safe and legal way, and if there is, that will take away at an entire pinch the people smugglers' business operation.
See, this is what I think is at the core of this, Michelle. This is going to be the only meaningful dividing line at the next election, is this issue, is whether you basically, and I'm not here to advocate for the Conservatives, I just want fewer people losing their lives in the Channel. You either want to have an effective deterrent that says, actually, smashing the gangs isn't going to be enough. We're going to need something else to discourage people from trying to get into Britain in the first place. Or you're going to go with this very vague, abstract talk about safe and legal routes and not having a deterrent, and let's just have people in the asylum system with no upper limits. The British people, 80% of whom think the borders are out of control, the vast majority of whom say they want lower numbers, they want fewer people coming into the country, and who also, to be blunt, are sick of paying, as we discovered this week, £14 billion a year on this illegal migration crisis. These numbers are enormous. Imagine what £14 billion could do to the NHS.
People are being kept in hotels because they're deliberately being kept in limbo by the government, which is refusing to process their claims, following the Illegal Migration Act, which you're supporting. That is the act that meant that people were no longer able to claim asylum if they came illegally. I think that's completely wrong. I think that you should allow people the right to stake their claim, to have it processed. I'm not saying that everyone who is an asylum seeker should be granted asylum. I'm actually a big fan of economic migration, but that's a separate issue. And I think that this is also being used as a huge distraction from the very, very large numbers of migrants who are not coming here illegally. The government is so embarrassed by the record high numbers of legal migration that they are desperate to talk about the fraction of migration which is irregular. And if you're talking about illegal migration, it's almost as though the government has no say over what's illegal. The government literally makes laws. They could say that you could come here and it's going to be legal. They're not doing that, and and in so doing, they are actually giving money to these criminal smugglers. They might as well be handing money to them.
We just also need to be clear that by removing these deterrents, by removing the Illegal Migration Act and the Rwanda plan, what we're doing is, in big, bright neon lights, we're saying to every would-be illegal migrant around the world, Britain is open for business.
But you're just saying it's a legal
migrant. So we
just
need to be realistic about what is going to happen if Labour actually pursue this plan.
Or you could be talking about going back to the status quo ante of the Labour years, for example, where the asylum system was actually reasonably well run. There wasn't a huge backlog running to years, and actually the government was able to decide.
We're not living in 2001 anymore.
Obviously, the situation is different now, but other countries have managed to sustain their economies, to their social cohesion, without effectively outlawing asylum, which is what this government's done.
So just so I understand your position, are you saying that actually we should have essentially processing units in pretty much every single foreign
No,
country?
I'm saying there are different options, Michelle. I'm saying that you could have processing centres in France, so people have their asylum claims adjudicated.
You're saying about doing it in places like Sudan, and so would you have these kind of facilities?
When I say Sudan, I'm using it as an analogue to the schemes that the government had for Afghanistan and Ukraine, for example, which were obviously hotspots, which were seeing a lot of refugees.
Let me just ask you as well quickly, what's cruel about if someone's trying to seek safety, if they are really being persecuted, what's cruel about them sending them to a safe country where they're going to have a decent life?
You're deporting people to a country which is, they have no connection to. They might not have any kind of family relation to. They don't want to go there. What we've seen with countries,
but if they're asylum seekers, it's not about family connections, Jonathan.
Well, it is often actually about that. That's
safety, isn't it?
One of the biggest reasons why people come to Britain is because they do have connections here. They speak English. What you saw when Israel had a Rwanda scheme, by the way, is that the vast majority of the people who went to Rwanda then escaped. They escaped Rwanda because it wasn't working for them. You have to be realistic. It's not just about cruelty, it's about pragmatism.
What about staying in the first safe country they arrive in?
Well, then look, this is... If you were in Italy or in Greece, you would not be using that argument. Why? Because it's simply not fair for the country furthest to the right to be absorbing everything. This is a global crisis. It should be absorbed by different countries, by different wealthy countries. Everyone should be doing their share. This is about solidarity.
I think most people watching this programme would bristle at the idea that Britain has not been doing its fair share through Hong Kong, through Ukraine,
what we've effectively done is we've effectively outlawed asylum and outsourced the problem to our neighbours.
We're trying to stop people losing their lives. We're trying to restore control.
If we were really concerned about people losing their lives, we would be allowing them safe and legal routes rather than forcing them onto boats where they are not safe.
What do you make to it all at home? I can tell you, I can almost hear you shouting at your televisions. I know you, and I know you'll have very strong opinions on that. Tell me your thoughts in all the usual ways. When I come back, I want to talk to you about the goings-on. You will have seen this on many lawn associated with universities. How much do you think, say, students should have over what their universities do when it comes to things like Gaza? Tell me.
Sir Jacob Rees-Mogg's State of the Nation, Monday to Thursday from 8 p.m.
The International Monetary Fund has estimated that Russia will outgrow all advanced economies in 2024. This is in spite of all the sanctions the West has imposed on Russia, in spite of its removal of the SWIFT banking system, in spite of the fact that Germany has almost entirely weaned itself off Russian gas, and in spite of the 50,000 soldiers who have died and the endless resources it has poured into the Ukraine war. So, what are we missing here? Why is Russia going to grow more than the rest of us? Well, it's simple. Russia is willing to make use of its own energy resources to provide abundant supply to its citizens. Increased supply means lower prices, and cheap energy is inextricably linked to economic growth. But since 2008, the United States has grown at twice the rate of the United Kingdom. The big difference is that America has much lower energy prices, while the UK insists on masochistic green policies. But it's no surprise that the Green fanatics in the Scottish government, where they know how to be fanatics, have had to backtrack on their flagship greenhouse gas reduction target. The SNP has committed to reducing Scotland's CO2 emissions by 75% by 2030. Now, the Climate Change Committee has reviewed its policy and advised that the absurd reduction target is out of reach.
Can we accept the CCC's recent re-articulation that this Parliament's interim 2030 target is out of reach? We must now act to chart a course to 2045.
It is time to recognise the truth. that net zero by 2050 is unrealistic and unaffordable. It's time we rid ourselves of this foolish and costly idea that will simply make people cold and poor. We need to prioritise cheap energy for Britain's consumers and for companies, for industry, enabling economic growth that will benefit us all.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And why it matters to you. From your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you. Good afternoon, Britain. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Stephen Dixon, and thanks for joining us on GB News, Britain's news channel.
On Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, can Labour stop the boats? Have the anti-vaxxers been proved right all along? Why I'm praying for an Israel victory in Eurovision, and as he's reduced to tears in Nigeria, is King Charles right to give Prince Harry a bit of tough love? Your weekend starts here, Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, from 8 p.m. on GB News. Bring a bottle.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company till 7 o'clock tonight. Alongside me, the Professor of Politics at University of Kent, Matt Goodwin, and the political commentator, Jonathan Liss. We were just talking then about whether or not you think that Labour will be the party to stop the boat crossings. Putting it politely, I think the short answer that I'm hearing, and not so subtle away from you, some of you guys, is no, you don't actually think that's going to happen. Andy says, Labour solve these problems. Are you joking? All they seem to do is make these things worse. People seem to have forgotten that Blair started so much of this with getting involved in so many foreign conflicts, says Andy. Alex says sending people to Rwanda is a ridiculously overly expensive project. Starmer has it right, he says. Stop it all at the root. It's not the smugglers that are the problem, says Sam. It is the people making these decisions, because there would be no smugglers without the demand for them. Well, there you go. I mean, you could go chicken and egg around that one all night long, couldn't you, in terms of who is driving the demand? Is it the people want to making the crossings, or is it those people offering those crossings? We've just been all talking about it in the break and all collectively saying that, of course, everybody wants to see an end to the things that we saw, that little girl who died in the Channel. I have to say, by the way, she did die having been trampled on by lots of the guys in that boat. What a lovely boatload of men we just imported that happily, seemingly, will stamp on a little girl to death. Goodness me. Anyway, let's talk protesters, shall we? Because you will have seen some of these scenes unfolding now in universities right up and down the country, actually. We've seen so many people taking to their tents with reams of demands, in some cases, about what they want their universities to do, or not do, should I say, when it comes to the situation in Gaza. Matt, you are a university professor.
Yeah.
I mean, I can get some of these images on the screens. We can go through some of these demands in a second. There you go. First things first, how much of a kind of say over the goings-on in terms of where funds get invested and all the rest of it do you think university students should have?
Well, I think on this issue, what we've seen both in the US and the UK with these protests, I think firstly, I'm very comfortable with students being able to exercise their free speech and their free expression on campus, to say what they really think about these issues. But what I don't think students should be able to do is dictate the policies of a university or indeed a democratically elected government. They should certainly not be able to disrupt university buildings, the teaching of other students, which we've seen in the US. They shouldn't be able to stage violent protests. They shouldn't be able to work with outside agitators to undermine the universities. And I think underlying the anti-Israel protests in both the US and the UK, what we've seen actually is the extent to which this very corrosive identity politics is now permeating universities across the West. It's simply impossible now to look at the universities and say we don't have a problem with higher education, because clearly we do. We have a very simplistic worldview that's taken hold of campus, which basically says Western nations are inherently evil, oppressive, bad and racist. The white majority is negative, including, by the way, Jews, who are seen as part of the majority group. And any and every minority around the world, from Palestine to Africa, is virtuous, is morally superior. We must align our institutions with those minority groups. Now that call it woke, call it social justice, call it identity politics. There is now a growing consensus among academics on the left and the right, from Yasha Monk on the left to Chris Rufo on the right, that this is now a real problem in the universities, and we need to really push back hard against this corrosive ideology.
Do we need to push back hard against this stuff, Jonathan?
I think it's a gross oversimplification, what Matt has just said. No one is saying that the Saudi Arabian regime is something that we should aspire to for its sort of enlightened values, and sort of Jews are part of the problem. That's an outrageous, would be an outrageously anti-Semitic thing to say. The vast majority of these students are not anti-Semitic. They're not racist.
Well, hold on. That's not an anti-Semitic thing to say. Well, just what I'm saying.
No, I'm not saying you're
what I'm saying is the universities
you something
have been implicitly mainstreaming anti-Semitism, which we've seen in the US.
I'm saying that if the students were saying that Jews were part of the problem, that would be an anti-Semitic thing to say. Clearly, I have not seen evidence that anywhere close to a majority, is saying anything like that. It's a very small minority of people who are using racist tropes, and obviously we should condemn those people unequivocally. But that is not what we're talking about. Look, I agree with you that we need free speech on campus, and it's extremely telling and predictable that the number 10 has called in some university officials to talk about
17 universities.
When given that the Conservative Party has made such a big deal about having a free speech czar, but to enforce the right to hear diverse opinions on campus. But lo and behold, it turns out that the opinions they really want to enforce are the opinions shared by the Conservative Party. So I am wary about this. Obviously, we have to deal with hateful speech, no matter where it comes from. But students have an absolute right, as Matt says, to express whatever opinions they like. What they actually manage to achieve is up to a negotiation between them and the universities concerned. But I absolutely don't subscribe to this oversimplified idea that Matt is saying, that these students think that we have goodies and baddies in this binary way. And actually what we're seeing when you listen to some of these students, they actually have extremely nuanced ideas, and actually quite a good grounding in a lot of the history behind this. They may not come to the same conclusions as you, but it doesn't mean that it's not valid to have those opinions and to seek change from the universities. And for what it's worth, a lot of these demands, I think, are quite reasonable. Reinvesting in Palestinian students, academics and scholars, given that Israel appears to have demolished all centres of higher learning in Gaza. That would seem to be an eminently sensible and reasonable request.
They want to do things like divest all the funds and collaborations away from basically any organisation that they would argue has too close a ties to people or places like the Israelis. They want all of these finances. So where are these universities investing and spending money? They want all of that to be kind of made much more transparent, and they want to overhaul their universities' investment policies and so on and so forth. Anyway, are you oversimplifying all this?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because you say that there's a nuanced view on campus. I don't recall seeing similar demands with regards to how universities engage with, let's say, China, or how universities deal with Saudi Arabia or corrupt regimes across Africa, because those don't fit into this very simplistic binary worldview, which the Palestine conflict is, the Palestine-Israel conflict is ideally is at the epicenter of. For these students, this is really about a very us and them zero-sum battle between the oppressors and the oppressed. Why should students be demanding where their universities invest resources in? What on earth has that got to do with their education and higher education? Why on earth should students be able to say how their universities, where they spend money, which banks they use?
Hang on, this is the product of capitalism. Actually, that's the product of the university model. That in the last 20 years, students have gone from being students who are sort of benefiting from a service to consumers and customers because they're paying a fortune for their education, and they are putting money into those university coffers.
Well, the mums
and
and
in the
dads
same
are
way
paying
that
it, but yeah.
when you're putting money, and the taxpayers have a right to know whether university is spending that money as well. When you are a consumer and you're a service user and you're paying good money for that service, it's actually, according to sort of capitalist norms, you have every right to know where that money is going and how the university is spending that money, whether you want to be associated with that, and to press for change. Now, should the universities bow to every demand? I'm not saying they should bow to every demand. I think it's notable that Trinity College Dublin, for example, has agreed to divest from certain corporations. Brown University in the United States has done something similar. There are different ways of going about this. A lot of these demands are quite reasonable.
This isn't just about capitalism. This is about prioritising the emotional safety of students. This is about treating students as though they are victims, as though actually we should pander to their every need and demand, and that is not how we should be running universities. The other thing is, imagine, because I just want to speak up for the Jewish communities here in Britain. Imagine. Well, I'm a Jew.
I slightly resent that because I'm Jewish myself, and you don't need to speak on my behalf.
Well, I've not heard you raise this point so far, but imagine how Jewish students on these campuses have felt, or indeed in the US, where they've been intimidated, harassed, beaten up, locked into rooms. They've been told by rabbis not to go onto campus because they are considered to be no longer safe for Jewish students. Should we just reflect on that for a minute? Because I haven't heard that so far. What I would like to see are all of the university heads, the Ivy League heads, who were summoned before Congress a few months ago, who were told to condemn in no uncertain terms anti-Semitism on campus. And what happened? 3 heads of the top Ivy League universities, Harvard, Penn State and MIT, they refused to condemn the anti-Semitism that was taking place on campus. Now, we all know...
Yeah, the Harvard head had to resign afterwards.
Well, she had to resign because of the outrage over her refusal to condemn anti-Semitism on campus.
Something bad happened,
so what I'm
and
saying,
she faced the consequences for it.
Imagine any other form of prejudice. Imagine if it was any other minority group. Imagine if it involved African Americans or Hispanic Latinos or whatever, trans students. There'd be outrage. But because it actually involved Israel, and because it involved Jews, university leaders refused to take action and condemn that anti-Semitism. And this is where many people ask themselves, why are we funding these institutions that are just preaching anti-Western dogma? And that's a legitimate question, I think, for taxpayers.
I don't think that universities are preaching anything.
But what about the anti-Semitism issue?
Obviously, what do you expect me to say? That anti-Semitism is good? Of course, that anti-Semitism should be condemned at every... And I think I probably have more experience of it personally than you do, actually, Matt, by the way.
That's why I'm surprised you're not speaking.
I actually am entitled to have a nuanced view, and actually, my ethnicity doesn't have to dictate all of my political opinions. And this is actually quite fundamental to this debate, because Jewish people, lo and behold, are in fact a broad group of people. We're not all the same, we don't all believe the same things, and we're entitled to have different beliefs. The expectation that we will all think the same is in fact anti-Semitic itself. So obviously, if there is a Jewish student who feels threatened in any way, I would absolutely want to extend my sympathy and to find out what exactly has been the threat made to those students, and if there is any evidence that those students have been threatened in any way, the firmest action should be taken against the culprits. But I don't think it's acceptable to say that because some Jewish students have expressed a kind of a feeling unsettled around campus, that we can therefore discount the entire set of protests and all the protesters who have been making points in a very, very valid way about what they see is the war crimes being perpetrated by Israel. And Judaism and Israel are not the same thing, by the way.
Well, you can have the final say on that. Coming up after the break, conspiracy theories. MPs have been briefed about what to look out for and be on high alert for. At the heart of many of them, apparently, is anti-Semitism. What do you make to all of this? See you in 2.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The warm weather will continue into the weekend. For many, another cracking day tomorrow. If you like, it's sunny, but we are in for a change by Sunday in the west, where we could well see some thunderstorms. In the east, it's mist and low cloud that's just dribbling back in from the North Sea, turning things fairly murky for the start of the weekend across eastern England. But elsewhere, long clear spells, decent night for spotting the aurora. There is a chance, particularly across the northern half of the UK. Not too chilly either. Temperatures mostly holding up in double digits, certainly in towns and cities. And a fine sunny start then to come on Saturday. The main exception will be Lincolnshire down through to Cambridgeshire. The London area may well start a bit murky, but by mid to late morning, that mist and low cloud will have cleared. Just the potential for it to affect some eastern coast of England at times. And we'll see cloud bubbling up through the day with one or two scattered, but potentially heavy showers over central and northern Scotland. But most will stay dry and fine and warm with temperatures in the low to mid-20s. Sunday's still pretty warm. A bit more of that mist and low cloud, particularly in eastern Scotland. So some har on that Aberdeenshire coast especially. Greater chance of seeing a few more showers breaking out across the Highlands, but more particularly further south, across the west of Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and Western England. Some thunderstorms potentially on Sunday afternoon. So we do have Met Office yellow warnings in place for that. Another warm one, and where it stays fine and sunny in the east, we could get to 26 or 27.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner with the latest. Big problems in Cheshire. The A558 is blocked westbound along Daresbury Expressway just east of Runcorn at the scene of an accident. And in Norfolk, partway between Thetford and Norwich, the A11 is blocked northbound just south of Attleborough at the scene of an accident with long queues on the London Road into Attleborough as you divert. In Hertfordshire, the A602, the parkway is shut through Hitchin at the scene of an accident. And the Surrey stretch of the M25, well, that's down to 2 lanes anti-clockwise. The 2 left lanes are blocked at the scene of an accident from junction 11 to 10 as you head towards the roadworks of the A3. And of course, from 9 o'clock this evening, the Surrey stretch of the M25 will be closed each way between 9 at Leatherhead and 10 at the A3 for major works until early Monday morning. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
We're GB News, and we come from a proud tradition of British journalism.
That's why I'm so excited to be here. It's something so new.
The first news channel to be launched in Britain in over 30 years.
Launched to represent the views of the British people.
To go where other broadcasters refuse to go.
How did you find out about the story in the first place?
Launched with one aim.
To be the fearless champion of Britain.
It's an absolutely fantastic atmosphere here.
This is GB News. The People's
Channel. GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hello there, I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company till 7 o'clock alongside with the Professor of Politics at the University of Kent, Matt Goodwin, and the political commentator, Jonathan Liss. Students are customers and universities are service providers. Says Andy, if students don't like what their university is doing, they should do what all customers are free to do, find another supplier. Simple. Claudette is having none of that. She says, if these students are so concerned about their university's investments, then they should have researched all of those things before applying and joining and attending that university. In America, some of these sit-ins have found, apparently, that many people in these camps are not even students at these universities. They're just there for the ride, apparently, according to Mark. Anyway, keep your thoughts on all of that coming in. I want to move on, although some might say it is in some way linked to some of that conversation we've just been having about anti-Semitism, because now there's new guidance out which shows MPs all about how to spot and combat so-called conspiracy theories. I've got to say, I found this quite interesting. So this was all commissioned by Penny Mordaunt. She worked alongside the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust to look at this and identify some of these areas. I think I can actually pop up onto the screen a chart at the moment. I have to caveat this, as I've just said, this was created by the Anti-Semitism Policy Trust. That might explain in some ways why they've firmly put anti-Semitism at the root of some of this stuff. They talk about COVID-19, chemtrails, the Great Reset, 15-minute cities, the Great Replacement Theory, the New World Order, and so on and so forth. Firstly, they call all of those things conspiracy theories. And then secondly, they somehow link them all back to anti-Semitism. What do you make either to the fact that some of these things are being regarded as conspiracy theories and or the link then to that central point?
I think that it's reasonable to make a link between some of these conspiracy theories and anti-Semitism, but I don't think I put anti-Semitism at the very, very centre of all of them. For example, I have a friend who believes that COVID was in fact a hoax, and he says, this is obviously not. I say he's a friend, but this is not an opinion that I have appreciated that he has expressed to me, and that he thinks that this was partly sort of about Israel, that Israel was using this to kind of enhance its pharma sector, or that it was Big Pharma that was responsible for COVID, not just that the vaccine, but COVID itself, to which the obvious reply would be, and the rest of the world just went along with that to suit Big Pharma or to suit the Israeli government or whatever. That, I would say, would be an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory, even though my friend wouldn't consider himself anti-Semitic at all. And it kind of touched on some of the issues that we were just talking about a moment ago, about sort of the conflation with Jews and Israel, and sometimes when people are criticising Israel, it is anti-Semitic. And when people are talking about George Soros, for example, that is an anti-Semitic trait. But the Rothschild banking family, for example, that's an anti-Semitic trait. But a lot of these things, these other things we see on this list, Michelle, I wouldn't say particularly related to anti-Semitism. The Great Replacement theory, for example, which is a white supremacist idea that sort of white people are being replaced by other races. I mean, that could apply to all kinds of ethnic minorities besides Jewish people. But the fundamental point is that everyone should be savvy and aware of what the conspiracy theories are, and that they should, particularly people in positions of responsibility and power, should not be propagating them.
Matt?
Well, I think obviously there are conspiracy theories, but I think I also get nervous about these debates around conspiracy theories or misinformation or disinformation, because I look at some of the things that we've branded conspiracy theories in recent history that have turned out to actually be pretty valid. I mean, I take the example of the lab leak, and the origins of COVID. I remember at the very beginning when people were suggesting that actually this might have something to do with a lab leak, and everybody said, oh, this is a crazy conspiracy theory. Nobody should take this seriously. We now know, actually, we should take that quite seriously. We should, explore the possibility of that. And, there are other issues too. I mean, I've seen within the immigration debate, as an example, people who express concern about migration have been warned of misinformation and disinformation, when in fact they're concerned about real-world things that are happening out there in the country. So yes, there are conspiracy theories, but I'm also anxious about how, concepts are expanded sometimes to try and silence or stigmatise arguments that members of the ruling class find quite uncomfortable. And that's where I just urge a bit of caution.
Yeah, I think it is just very much. You mentioned then about that lab leak theory. I know many people have got in touch with me that they were concerned when you go back in time to the beginnings of COVID. You were immediately called all kinds of names if you had the audacity to even think anything other than what was dictated to you by pretty much every single media outlet and politician and so on and so forth in the land. Many people will remember saying such as, you will earn nothing and be happy. You'll have lots of farmers, for example, feeling very disgruntled now about things like, well, hang on a second, where's all of this joined-up policy thinking where they have to give 10% of their land over to planting trees and so on and so forth? I can hear lots of you telling me your thoughts about that at home. Don't be backwards in coming forwards, getting in touch. I'm sure you will not. Let me know your thoughts after the break. Are you a veteran? Would you go back to the army to help plug gaps in staff? And are you a young person, or do you have one? Do you think they should attend a week-long summer camp to try and entice people to join? Tell me.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
So Meghan's launched her new lifestyle range, starting with jams, and it's called American Riviera Orchard. Apparently it's been made from organic fruits growing in Meghan and Harry's Montecito gardens. If we can believe it. I reserve an air of scepticism. But she sent out 50 jars of this jam to influencers and celebrity friends in the hope of trying to boost some sales to her products. But it's ended up winning for King Charles because fans have gone to Highgrove website and King Charles's jam has sold out.
So hang on, why did
sales
they go?
has gone through the roof.
Why
for
did they
him.
go to the Highgrove website?
Well, I think it's a bit of a blow against Meghan because they're saying, we don't want your jam, we're going to go and get the king. So it just shows how popular the king is. This is what she's always wanted. Her dream has been to be like this Gwyneth Paltrow-style lifestyle guru. She's always loved Gwyneth's website, Goop. When she set up the TIG, which was her website when she was still in Suits as a working actress, that was the brand, the style of brand that she was going for, was this Gwyneth-style New York elite, very princessy. So this is her chance now by trying to cash in on her royal title because she is now a duchess, so she's using that to try and elevate her brand. And she's really now trying to carve out herself as this new Martha Stewart.
And she's coming out with the cooking show as well on
She's coming
Netflix.
out with a cooking show, and she's. I mean, to be fair to Meghan, she has always tried to say that she's into healthy eating, organic food, cooking. But I don't see this being a success. It just will not happen for her because she's just burnt too many bridges. People just don't believe in her brand. They don't think she's authentic. So, are you an actress? Are you a guru? Are you a duchess? Are you a philanthropist?
Who are you, Meghan?
Who actually are you? This is what we're asking. I don't think anyone knows. I don't think Meghan really knows who she is.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
I'm Patrick Christie's. Every weeknight from 9, I bring you 2 hours of unmissable, explosive debate and headline-grabbing interviews. What impact has that had?
We got death threats and the bomb threats on.
Our job is to do what's in the best interest of our country.
You made my argument for me.
My guests and I tackle the issues that really matter with a sharp take on every story.
I'm hearing it up and down the country. That was a beginning, not an end.
Patrick Christie's tonight from 9 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry with you till 7. Professor Matt Goodwin and Jonathan Liss remain alongside me. Let's just cut to the chase. We all know by now that recruitment into the army is somewhat lacking, so you need creative solutions then. There's a couple of things being thrown up, and I want to run them by you. Do you think a week-long summer camp to get teenagers involved with the army is going to be a good thing? And also, if you're a veteran, what about bringing you guys back, almost like a supply staff type thing to try and plug gaps in the army? Good idea or not? Matt?
I think it's a good idea, you know. I mean, I think if you look at the problems facing Britain...
Oh, can I just say, sorry, everyone, very rudely, regular viewers will wonder what I'm doing. It is Friday. Dewberry Tavern is open. Cheers, everyone.
All right, cheers.
Cheers to the weekend.
Happy
I
Friday.
forgot. Continue.
Cheers. I think, you know, you look at the problems facing Britain, we've got lots of people on welfare, lots of people outside the labour market, we've got young people not really knowing whether they should be going to education, work, all those sorts of things. I think anything that encourages a sense of collective identity, gives people purpose, gives people a reason to get up in the morning, is worth exploring.
Jonathan?
I mean, it won't surprise you to know that I have some suspicions about the military in general. I think we should have a military. I don't think we should abolish it or anything. And I suppose within that, if there are people who might want a career in the military or think that it might suit them, and they don't have a military background and they don't necessarily have a way that they might find themselves in the military, then this might be quite good for them. I don't discount it. I certainly wouldn't want it to be mandatory in any way.
One of my viewers has said that he once upon a time wrote to the then Prime Minister John Major and suggested that all secondary school basically had what he calls combined cadet forces. He feels if that had been introduced, if they'd paid attention to him, Bruce his name is, that actually situations with the military might not be as bad as they currently are. One of my viewers has got in touch and said, can you ask Matt Goodwin what are these rumours he's hearing about the new party that he wants to set up?
Yeah, so I think everybody's fed up with British politics. We've had 14 years of Conservative failure. We all know, I think, Labour don't really have the answers to Britain's problems. Over the last year, I've pulled together 34,000 people on the Substack, which is a blog that goes out every week. And I've said to some of those people last night, if we get to 100,000 subscribers, then we'll go into politics. We'll either start something new, or we'll support something that comes along and is trying to address some of these problems much more seriously. Because I think if you look at the people who are trying to bring about change at the moment in British politics, you look at, say, some of the smaller parties that are starting to cut through in the polling, I actually think the potential for bringing about change is much bigger than what they are currently realising. And this is above left and right, Michelle. This is about actually giving power back to the British people and saying that on big issues, on immigration, on crime, on the economy not working for British families, we need to give power back to the British people.
Power to the people.
I mean, I just would kind of ask Matt how this would be different from the Reform Party, for example. And also, I mean, you know better than anybody about how our electoral system works.
Sure.
And that we've had no end of vanity projects over the years, from Robert Kilroy's Silk to Change UK, and obviously they all tanked in the polls. I'm sure that you'll give them a run for their money. But you know that you are not going to, a new party is not going to suddenly mop up a groundswell of support unless you have, incredibly just the serendipitous coming together with an incredibly charismatic leader such as Nigel Farage with the Brexit Party, which came.
I think there are a lot of people in British politics at the moment who are part of the solution to the problems that we face. But I think actually, in order to fix the problems facing Britain, we're going to need a much wider coalition of people to bring about that kind of change. And small parties, obviously, it's very difficult under a first-past-the-post system. Not impossible, but very difficult. I've asked the Labour Party, they were a small party once. Not impossible, but it's also beyond the ballot box. It's about changing the ideas and the conversation in this country. There are many issues that we talk about that you can't talk about out there in the country. Mass immigration being out of control.
We're talking about the whole time. We've been talking about it for the last hour. We talk about nothing else in this country.
Here we do, but out there, the Labour and the Conservative Party now share a big consensus on these issues. They think exactly the same. We need to change that.
Well, there you go. Don't forget as well, we addressed this yesterday, didn't we? Dominic Cummings, he was talking about potentially setting up another party as well. I think his was called Startup or something, wasn't it? Robert, one of the viewers, he's got in touch and said he would solve all of the issues when it comes to protests at the universities. It'd make all universities go all online. Who's this as well? I like this one. One of my viewers has just been in touch, Steve. He says, I'm an ex-infantry officer and I'm still fit enough to die for the flag, my king, my wife, my daughter, my grandchildren. If called to, he would absolutely step up to the plate. But would you? Jonathan, thank you very much for your company. Matt, for yours too. And of course, thank you very much for being with me for the last hour. Don't go anywhere though. Lee Anderson is up next, but nanites from me.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening. Welcome to your latest weather update from the Met Office here on GB News. The warm weather will continue into the weekend. For many, another cracking day tomorrow. If you like, it's sunny, but we are in for a change by Sunday in the west, where we could well see some thunderstorms. In the east, it's mist and low cloud that's just dribbling back in from the North Sea, turning things fairly murky for the start of the weekend across eastern England. But elsewhere, long clear spells, decent night for spotting the aurora. There is a chance, particularly across the northern half of the UK. Not too chilly either. Temperatures mostly holding up in double digits, certainly in towns and cities. And a fine sunny start then to come on Saturday. The main exception will be Lincolnshire down through to Cambridgeshire. The London area may well start a bit murky, but by mid to late morning, that mist and low cloud will have cleared. Just the potential for it to affect some eastern coast of England at times. And we'll see cloud bubbling up through the day with one or two scattered, but potentially heavy showers over central and northern Scotland. But most will stay dry and fine and warm with temperatures in the low to mid-20s. Sunday's still pretty warm. Bit more of that mist and low cloud, particularly in eastern Scotland. So some ha on that Aberdeenshire coast especially. Greater chance of seeing a few more showers breaking out across the Highlands, but more particularly further south, across the west of Northern Ireland, parts of Wales and Western England. Some thunderstorms potentially on Sunday afternoon. So we do have Met Office yellow warnings in place for that. Another warm one, and where it stays fine and sunny in the east, we could get to 26 or 27.
Looks like things are heating up. boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
The latest GB News travel.
Good evening, I'm Johnny Ratner with the latest. Big problems heading north of Edinburgh up the M90 after an earlier collision just south of the Queensferry crossing. All restrictions have been lifted, but it's still queuing back towards the M9. In North Yorkshire, southwest of Moulton, the A64 is closed in Barton Hill and Whitwell at the scene of an accident. And on the M62 in Cheshire, the left lane's blocked eastbound 11 to 12 after a van caught fire just west of the M60. Recovery work is taking place. On to the Essex stretch of the M25, the clockwise exit is blocked at junction 29 at the A127, where fire engines are on scene. And just to forewarn you, from 9 o'clock tonight until across the weekend till Monday morning, the Surrey stretch of the M25 will be closed each way from 9 at Leatherhead to 10 at the A3 for the major ongoing works. That's the latest.
You can stay up to date throughout the day by visiting our website, gbnews.com.
It's the biggest cash prize we've given away to date. An incredible £20,000 that you could use however you like. And because it's totally tax-free, every single penny will be in your bank account to do whatever you like with. £20,000 in tax-free cash really could be yours this summer. But you've got to be in it to win it. For another chance to win £20,000 in tax-free cash, text PRIZE to 63232. Text costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or post your name and number to GB05, PO Box 8690, Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 5 p.m. on the 31st of May. Full terms and privacy notice at gbnews.com/win. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
If you want your news to be straight talking,
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
down to earth,
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
and most importantly, honest,
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories